I'm going to talk to you briefly about, as a practitioner in this area, we all have a long story. I started with Coopers and Lybrand. That was my first career, was to be a chartered accountant. I left that, went into forestry because I loved the outdoors, and then eventually had an econ degree as well. So I have this weird background. But in 1990, I read, actually it was 1989, there was an important report by the World Resources Institute called Wasting Assets, and it argued basically that the GDP isn't measuring the value of forests or oil and gas in terms of, it's not counting in the, sort of a depreciation on natural capital. And with my accounting background, I thought this doesn't make any sense. So in 1990, I did it first as a good bureaucrat with the Alberta government. I spent 13 years there, and Jillian's chair, I think, before Jillian arrived. And I just started to do back-of-the-envelope assessments, did the first carbon account for Alberta. How much are the forests of Alberta sequestering of the emissions of Suncor and Syncrude and all the other industries? Did a forestry account, did oil and gas, did agricultural soil account. So these were believe me, this was just back-of-the-envelope. I didn't get approval, this was not my job description. But I knew it would be important, and it led me to go even further to look at other aspects of well-being, happiness, all that. And it was in Alberta Treasury where I spent my last years and left in '98 that I really got sort of the aha, because we would write the government business plan, and that's when I really saw that we were not operating governments without a balance sheet, and it didn't make any sense. How could Coca-Cola, Warren Buffett would be really upset if Coca-Cola didn't have a balance sheet. So that's going to be the message of today is we need to get serious. We've been at this for at least 25 years. We still have no commitment by provincial or federal governments to issue a natural capital balance sheet for this country, and yet Canada's a natural capital superpower. And we have huge environmental liabilities we're chalking up every day in the tailings ponds in Fort McMurray, and there's no account for them. So this is just lousy accounting. So I used to teach corporate social responsibility at the University of Alberta School of Business, and I will show this slide. This is a father of accounting, Luca Pacioli and Leonardo da Vinci. And they said in 1494 that a wise business person in Venice knows what they have by taking inventory. And so that's the first basis of natural capital accounting, or even ecological service measurement, is what is the integrity of a wetland or a watershed. What is its condition? What's its physical condition? I don't care about when we audited, Honda dealerships with Coopers, we didn't care about the value of Hondas in the parking lot. First we went out and counted them. How many are there? And then we worried about market valuation. So the same is true of natural capital. I love Warren Buffett because Warren Buffett goes to sleep at night, reading annual statements. The other day I thumbed through MEC's annual statements. My daughter thought I was a weirdo. But I was curious about what the shareholder value of 3.8 million members of MEC was. It's $50 per member. Even though your $5 membership is it never appreciates, right? So that's what I do for fun. But Warren loves balance sheets, and I know that there's something about when he looked at Coca-Cola's balance sheet, he knows that when they do an assessment of the brand of Coca-Cola, it's 25% of their balance sheet. If you can check it out online right now, and you say, how do they come up with that value? What's the brand worth? What's Alberta brand worth? But believe me, there's no natural capital brand value in Alberta. So I've been working with others, Toby Heaps from Corporate Knights, since 1989 when I left government, 98 I guess, ventured out as a consultant, getting actually paid to do this stuff. I said, okay, we can measure natural capital. We can help organizations like the Canadian Boreal Initiative, Ducks Unlimited, my latest study, First Nations, municipalities, right? Provincial governments. We can show provincial governments how to do this accounting. And I keep saying it's time for a natural capital balance sheet. Now this is what a balance sheet should look like, in my opinion. It would have assets, liabilities, and guess what? Shareholder equity. We're all shareholders in the natural patrimony of this country. And yet, have you ever gotten an annual report with your budget summary from Mr. Harper? No. Oh, this is crazy, right? This is the connection between ecological functions and human well-being. You try to follow the arrows. The study that we released in June for Ducks Unlimited was an important precedent. Why? Because Ducks Unlimited hired me to, this is a real rancher actually, on one of the wetlands that Ducks Unlimited has secured. The purpose of the study said Mark, CEO, wants you to be able to demonstrate the value of conserving wetlands to Mr. Flaherty, who is alive still, and the Harper government, the Treasury Board. Can you make a business case that conservation of these wetlands is worth the investment of $1 of government funding? So the answer to that, we developed basically accounting protocols. Again, going back to Luca and my accounting background, saying, first of all, we do a baseline inventory. How many wetlands are there? Are they secured? Are they held in, jointly between other organizations? What's the fair market value? What's the book value of these right now? You bought them from the farmer at X dollars, but guess what? They're not on where's your balance sheet? Nothing on DU's balance sheet. Oh, you just treated them like cash flow items going through every year. You've got 2.5 million hectares, and you have no accounting for them. I know your tax accountants and your auditors are going to say, don't do that. You don't, because that would be opening up Pandora's box, and the farmers would think they deserve more. And I said, no, but for management accounting purposes, for purposes of strategic positioning, you would start to value these natural assets as true assets in the truest form of the sense of capital. And we could even get fancy, and I call it the societal well-being return on investment, or the well-being ROI. You just make stuff up, right? Let's be creative here. Got ROI, conventional ROI, got social return, why not well-being ROI? So how do these wetlands contribute to the well-being of Canadians? Well, governments really want to know what's the return on every dollar of taxes. Well, we were able to do a forensic tax assessment. These are the estimates of how much the investments of government dollars into DU's programs will generate in terms of income taxes, corporate taxes, GST. We looked at how GDP is generated, employment revenues, ecosystem services, recreation, and tourism values. This is the summary slide of the work. You can find all these results online, but we looked at employment, and the big bottom line, simple soundbite was $1 invested January 1st by federal provincial governments into wetland conservation through Ducks Unlimited returns full life cycle July 17th. Are you happy with that return on investment? That's just taxes. That we haven't counted all the benefits of cleaning water and all those things, but if we add those things, we get about an ROI of 1 to 22. So now, a lot of these values, of course, are still rather speculative. Carbon may be the closest thing. Of course, we've done other analyses looking at the value of tree cover in the Calgary watershed and how it relates to every cubic meter water treatment, or the value of the Catskill Mountains to New York as a water treatment ecological service, and I can back out the capital and operating costs and calculate the per hectare value of conserving that Catskill watershed. So these are the things that we calculated for DU. But communicating this stuff is sometimes pretty tough, especially for biologists. So the other work that precedes this, of course, is the first study Sarah Wilson and I did back. We were hired by the Canadian Boreal Initiative, and I remember that we were in the National Press Gallery in Ottawa, and all my bureaucrat friends from StatsCan and Environment Canada were like, thank goodness you did this work. I said, it took two of us to do this work on probably $10 an hour. And we had 50 bureaucrats who could have done it in a week because they had the same data. But we basically developed a precedent by saying the ecological functions of Canada's boreal forests are probably about 10 to 13 times more than the GDP on a hectare basis. But of course, we're not saying don't cut trees on Monday or don't take out any more oil to the oil sands. We need to balance. Economics is about balance, right? And trade-offs. At least that's what Vic Adamowicz taught me. And so, how are we optimizing both economic benefits on the same hectare of land? That's the rule in accounting. It's called highest and best use of the asset. How are we going to know that we're getting high GDP per hectare, but yet not incurring unfunded ecological liabilities? One of the ecological liabilities, I asked Peter Lee, Global Forest Watch, who did all our GIS mapping, I said, color in red the linear disturbance on the boreal landscape, and I'm going to use it as a proxy for depreciation of the ecological integrity. I don't know what the reduction in value should be, but clearly there is a relationship between linear natural disturbance and the loss of ecological functionality. John Thompson and I did the North Saskatchewan watershed for the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance, which, guess what, is starving for cash operating funds. Because what these organizations need is an annual report on the state of the watershed. What we did here is we mapped every 500 square meters in terms of GDP and ecological services. And of course, we know that in Edmonton, you're going to get high GDP values per hectare. In the upper reaches of the watershed, you get high ecological service values. We did a study following the Boreal study. Canadian Boreal Initiative hired us again to do a study for the Mackenzie, and working with the DATESHO and their latest land use plan, mapped out both the value of the ecological services, but also the GDP on a watershed. And we got really cool because we realized there's a correlation between NASA's nighttime sky photography of light pixels, lumens, and GDP. So I can estimate GDP on the lumen, the light intensity of this watershed, which is very cool. Last 2 years ago, we released the Canadian Index of Wellbeing. It was going to be a national accounting of the well-being of the country. And in that study, I worked on the ecological health report. And I wanted to show Canadians that where they live. This is a map of every sub-basin watershed in the country. So if you live in the Don Valley Parkway, what is the integrity of, what's the soil carbon account? The green would be high carbon values. We can overlay toxic releases, GHG emissions, all kinds of other data layers to provide what we might call a well-being of your watershed report. So those are my comments. My challenge to anyone who listens, Paul Martin or both former prime ministers, current prime ministers, Jim Prentice, is come on guys, let's get a balance sheet for our natural assets. Thank you.